The last 4 or 5 weeks, the last 4 or 5 episodes of the Inner Wealth podcast have been the theme of receiving, giving and receiving, giving versus receiving, the balance of giving and receiving. And what I've been diving into, and one of the things that's really starting to, I guess, heal, for lack of a better word, or resolve in my life is the imbalance between giving and receiving. And I bought into at a very young age the absolute destructive lie that it's better to give than receive. It's not better to give than receive. Greatest lie ever handed down from generation to generation. The absolute truth is that giving and receiving are equal, and they're an exchange, and they're both equally valuable. And in order to live a very super high quality life, like I know we all want to live, we must be willing to receive at an equal level that we give. And if you're anything like me, and an overgiver, a massive overgiver and underreceiver, I am surrounded by people that struggle to receive. And in the Inner Wealth Mastermind, there's people in there that are, we talk about receiving and how in some cases how receiving easily is difficult. And it's almost like our nervous systems are wired to give and not receive. And our nervous system only has one goal and one goal only, and that's to keep us alive. It tries to keep us alive by keeping us in familiar circumstances. And it tries to keep us in familiar circumstances because it knows how to keep us alive there. And it has proven to be able to do so. And any change of anything, whether it be a behavior, an act, a decision, a feeling, an emotion, threatens the nervous system. And it's like it sends up signals and flares of danger. And it tries to get us back into something familiar because it knows how to keep us alive there. And receiving, the balance of giving and receiving are exactly the same. If you're anything like me, my upbringing, my childhood was all about not being selfish and not wanting too much and not being too much and just shrinking myself for the benefit of everybody else around me. And whether it be my parents, my siblings, it was always about you're selfish, you're selfish, you're selfish. You always get what you want, right? You ask for too much. All those things went in to build a narrative and a story that I carried around in my nervous system for 53 years and 53 and a half. And now I'm starting to dissolve it. But all these stories in there about giving and receiving, and it's better to give than receive. And if you ask for too much or receive too much, then you're greedy or you're selfish. And those are all lies. We are here to be on the receiving end of life, just as equally we are here to be on the giving aspect of life. And this is an exchange. And we must be willing to level up in our ability to receive at an equal value, at an equal level than giving. And the book that I'm writing right now, the workshop that I've launched and I announced for August 28th and 29th, right outside of St. Louis, Missouri, is called Built to Give, Rebuilt to Receive. And it's where we start the process. I help you understand, how you've gotten to this place of overgiving. And from there, I help you understand the work required to level up in your ability to receive. And it's a 2-day powerful workshop. I invite everybody to come and hang out. And no matter your level of competency or capability or capacity of receiving, it will help you level up from there. So this isn't just for people that haven't been on the receiving end of life. This is for people that want to upgrade their ability to receive in life. And I'm talking about receive everything: compliments, money, success, love, every pleasure, all of it. It's to level up in all aspects of achieving or receiving in our life. All right. So I invite you to come and hang out. I'll put the link in the comments. I'd love to come and play. We're going to have a lot of fun. This is the first time I've ever launched this workshop or taught this type of content, this type of material. But as I'm understanding it more and more on a daily basis, and as I'm stepping into it, I want to lead the charge in helping us kind of move past this struggle to receive. All right. I had in my mastermind, I just had one of my students when we were at our retreat in Nashville, Tennessee. She was talking about, leading yoga and leading women's circles. And just yesterday, as I record this podcast episode, just yesterday, she led her first yoga session. And that's super, super exciting. Like she allowed herself to receive what she wanted to receive. And up to this point, she's been a massive overgiver in life. She gives to her kids and she gives to her husband and she gives to her family and everybody around her. But receiving anything positive and anything beneficial for herself has been, it's caused her a lot of guilt and shame. And now she's allowing herself to be on the receiving end of life. There's another guy that's in the Inner Wealth Mastermind. He launched a candy business and people are starting to ask for his candy and receiving the love, receiving the praise, receiving the requests has been a struggle for him. And he just sent me a couple messages, a couple texts about how uncomfortable it is even getting orders for his candy because he's an overgiver and he overgives regularly and he hasn't allowed himself to always be an easy receiver, easily on the receiving end of life. And in the mastermind, in my life, in the lives of everybody I'm coming in contact with, I'm helping them step into another level of healthy selfishness. And I'm asking them, where aren't you selfish enough? Let's level up in our ability to be selfish in all aspects of life. With the only time that we cross a line with selfishness is if we intentionally hurt someone to get what we want. That's the only time you ever cross the line, is when you hurt somebody intentionally because you asked for what you want or because you take what you want, because you get what you want at somebody else's expense, deliberately and intentionally. But in our lives, in our business, in our relationships, it is super, super important, critical, and relevant that we level up in our ability to receive. And that's what my life and my teachings and the content has been about over the last 4 or 5 weeks. It's, where aren't you being selfish enough? And let's level that up. Let's get past the nervous system collection and accumulation and the noise and the suffering and the pain that's collected in the nervous system, the blockages that are keeping you on the overgiving side of life and the under-receiving. And just this morning, as I work through all this and as I do the energy work, because that's what this is, nervous system work is very much somatic and energy work. As I, in the morning, I've done episodes about the drill method. Drop into your body when you start to feel some resistance in life, right? And some pain or some resistance in your nervous system, drop into your body, recognize what you're feeling, inquire and investigate into what it's trying to teach you. Listen to what it's saying and then let it go. And every time you let it go, every time you let that resistance go in your body, there's less to deal with. And this is how we let go of the resistance that's in our nervous system that keeps us stuck in life. And we become more free inside. Our limitations open up, our comfort zone opens up, and we allow ourselves to grow. We allow ourselves to be on the receiving end of life. You can either have comfort or growth. And to become or to grow, you must feel the discomfort of the growth and then drop into your body, recognize what you're feeling and inquire and investigate, listen to what it's trying to tell you, and then let it go ultimately. And every time you become a little more free, and every time you drill into anything, you're going to open up your nervous system to new circumstances and new levels of freedom. I hope this is making sense. And as my students start to be on the receiving end of life, they're using the drill method, they're using shadow work, they're using some of the tools that I teach in Built to Give, Rebuilt to Receive. They're using some of the tools to allow themselves to be on the receiving end of life in a more comfortable way, in a more flowing way. But as I do my nervous system work every morning, as I do this nervous system work each and every day and in all interactions, I am coming to new realizations. And part of this podcast is me sharing what I'm realizing, me sharing what I'm learning. And this is a mechanism, a channel for a method for me to share what I'm learning. And you're literally by listening to this podcast episode or by listening to this podcast, You are literally listening to me learning in the world, and I'm learning or I'm teaching what I'm learning. And I just had a realization today that it seems so freaking small, but it has been super profound today. And I also shared it on my call this morning with my mastermind in our soul sciences call. And I shared this little profound revelation, and uh, immediately I got one or two people that freaking it just cracked them open, and it allowed them to see something different. For the 15th time, I'll say I've been a massive overgiver. And I remember one story, and this is one of my favorite stories, one of my favorite recognitions of the fact that I was an overgiver. And I took pride in depleting myself, I guess, or giving more than I received or giving more than I asked for. And it gave me like almost a sense of self-worth and self-esteem and significance. But that's why I was always on the giving end of life and not on the receiving, because I always derived my significance to giving, and I wouldn't allow myself to receive because that felt shameful. It was like I was robbing somebody else of significance. But one time I was in the Marine Corps, in the United States Marine Corps in Denver, Colorado. I was stationed at Lowry Air Force Base back in 1993. And right before, a year or two before Lowry Air Force Base closed. But it was a training facility. And I was in school, in tech school for a year. And I remember one day there was a Marine named Lance Corporal McLeod, and he was walking one of our new guys around the floor, the deck. And we're in the Marine Corps, so we use naval terminology. But he was walking around on the Marine Corps deck where all the Marines were stationed, where we were. And I remember hearing him say, he was telling the new Marine, he said, there's only 3 people right now you got to get to know immediately. One, and he pointed to the senior Marines room. He said, Lance Corporal Nicholas, that's your senior Marine. He is the senior Marine on deck, and he is responsible for this floor, this deck, and all of us operating well. He said, pointed down to the squad leaders' rooms. There were 4 squad leaders' rooms in succession. And he said, there's the squad leaders' rooms, and just get to know your squad leader. And I don't think he mentioned which squad leader it was, but there's your squad leaders. Get to know your squad leader, because that's your second in command. And then he pointed down to my room and he said, there's Kitco. There's Kitco's room. And most times Kitco is going to be able to help you more than the senior Marine or your squad leader will. And if you need anything, Kitco is always a helping hand. Now, I was like a bank to the Marines. I would lend money to them and never ask for interest. It was like an interest-free loan. I would help them. I would always be of service. I would always be of value. I was always lending my stuff out. Like, I had knocks on my door all the time, people coming to ask for what they needed from me. And I always said yes, even if it was at my expense. And I know it sounds ridiculous now, but I was naive, and I didn't know how to be on the receiving end of life. And it didn't start with this. This is just carryover from learning how to shut down my receiving faculties before. And I remember the parade of Marines coming to ask me for help, and I was always a helpful hand. And that's why I was always an overgiver. And I always felt shameful for asking for help. And I always tried to figure out a way to do it myself. But that's why I became so self-sufficient, is because of the guilt and shame that it created me to bother, and I'm air quoting, to bother or burden anybody else, right? This is what I mean when I say an imbalance in our ability to give and receive, all right? Giving is not better than receiving, even though I adopted that belief when I was a child. I got to level up in my ability to receive. Okay, I hope this is making sense. Here's where the new awareness comes into play. My children are 24 and 21 years old. Mine and Angie, my wife Angie, my and Angie's kids are 24 and 21. And we still pay their car payment. We still pay their car insurance. We still pay their cell phone, because they're still they're still trying to, like, the youth today and the 20 somethings today aren't like us. That, like, when I was growing up, when I was 24 years old, I was completely self-sufficient, but it was a different world. It was a different economy, right? It was a different set of factors. It, the cost of living wasn't quite what it is today, and you could easily afford, with a decent job, you can easily afford to be autonomous. But anyway, we take care of our kids. We still finance some of their lives. And there's times where, people like Angie, some of Angie's family, Angie grew up in dirt poverty. Some of Angie's family asked for money because of their situation. And we've struggled up until now to ever say no to anybody. All right. The no's, when the no's come, it's not easy for us. But here's what I've realized today is I have said yes to almost every request that's been made of me. And I've put most people first out of, I'm not going to say that yet. I have put myself second in most interactions. And if it's between what you want, if what you want and what I want are in conflict, then I've tended over 53 and a half years to subvert myself and to make you more important than me. And that's an inability to receive. That's an overgiver. And I realized this morning that there's a reason that I did that. And it comes down to one word, and it's responsibility. I have felt an over sense of responsibility for everybody in my life, for family, for clients, for prospects, for strangers. I have felt an over responsibility for everybody. Like, I am responsible for everybody else's well-being. And my well-being is less important than their well-being. That might sound very, very simple to you, and it might be, well, no shit, right? You're not responsible for them. But it was kind of like game changing when I reflected on and contemplating the magnitude of over responsibility that I felt for everybody in my life. And that is what created the overgiver and the underreceiver, is that over sense of responsibility that I had for everybody else. And right after I had that realization and I had that aha, I'm like, okay, so let's unpack this and let's understand this at a deeper level, because I don't want to say no to everybody. I don't want to just not be on the giving end of life. I don't want to just practice selfishness for the sake of selfishness and just say no to everybody and only receive. So what's the balance to the over responsibility? What is the balance? How do you balance that out? And how do you make sense of the equality of giving and receiving when you're trying not to be over responsible for everybody else? And when I really sat with that for a while and dove into it, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and it felt really good to come to this awareness. There's a difference between responsibility and generosity. And we can be generous without being responsible for other people. We can execute and demonstrate generosity, which is from abundance and from overflow, without being responsible to others and responsible for others. When we give from a place of less than overflow, it's because we feel a sense of responsibility for the other person's well-being. Healthy giving does not contain elements of responsibility for another person's well-being. And this is what generosity is. But if you feel responsible for somebody else's well-being and you give from a place of obligation, of fear, of guilt, of shame. That's being over responsible. I hope this is making sense. I hope this is clicking, because it clicked for me in a big way. And I hope I'm saying it in a way that makes sense for you. Because when I shared this with another student in the Inner Wealth Mastermind that I know has the same struggles, he said, it's so simple, but it's so difficult. And I got a text that his voice was amplified. And it's like, this is a great realization. It's like some things that he had always like fallen prey to, I guess. I don't know another way to say that. I'm not going to use the V word, but things that he had fallen to in the world, they started to make sense. He felt responsible for everybody else's well-being, and he wasn't able to say no to them. And an inability to say no because you don't have overflow, or you're not feeling inspired, or it'll deplete you, or it'll lessen your well-being. That's being over responsible for other people. And that's a lack of healthy boundaries for yourself. My children are 24 and 21. They are above the age of being minors in this world, and they are legally their own human being. I literally have no more legal responsibility to my children. Now, I still give to them because I am generous. And one of my daughters, my daughter Megan, even sent me and Angie a text that said, thank you guys for being so generous. Not all the parents here at college are. They make their kids are in school taking classes, and they're also working just to pay their car payment or their car insurance, or even their rent. And although our daughter Megan has some fiduciary responsibility, she does have a job and she does pay for some of her bills, we carry the burden of them because we want her mindset and her focus to be in her schoolwork. And we do that because we're generous, not because we're overly responsible to her. When she can assume more control over her finances, we'll give it to her. But for now, we're going to continue to be generous, because we can be generous and still be selfish. Those two can fit in the same body. They can live in the same body. And I said that on last week's episode. Being selfish and generous can live in the same body and take up the same space, because when you allow yourself a healthy dose of selfishness, you're going to have more to give away, and you can be even more generous in the world. But someone who's not selfish, or who refuses to allow themselves to receive at all, not going to have anything to give. But I guarantee you they'll try, because they're not a good receiver, and I guarantee you they're a great giver. So they're always going to try to give from lack and from scarcity. And all it's going to do is continue to deplete them more and more. This whole thing that I'm sharing with you today isn't about saying no and not giving back to other people and not giving to other people. It's about making sure that you are being responsible for the only person or people that you are responsible for. And if you do have minor children, if you have children under the legal age, then of course you're responsible for them. You are responsible to provide and protect them. But if you have adult children, or if you just have adults in your life, then you are no longer legally responsible for them. And that means that if you are not legally responsible for anyone, you are literally responsible for one person, and one person only in this lifetime, and that is you. You. Anything else that you give is from generosity. Unless you're giving out of over-responsibility, which comes from a place of guilt, from shame, from trying to avoid feelings of selfishness by taking over responsibility for everybody else's well-being. And when you are only responsible for you, in a world of 8.3 billion people, you can preserve your well-being and make sure it's not depleted to take care of somebody else's. And you can literally assume responsibility for the only person that you are responsible for in a world of 8.3 billion, and that's you. And of course, if you're legally responsible for someone else, you have some duty and some obligation to be responsible. But ultimately, you are not here to assume responsibility for everybody in your life. At some point, relinquish that responsibility and that over responsibility. Allow them to manage their own well-being and to step into their own personal power, their own personal authority, and their own personal sovereignty. Take back responsibility for yourself and increase your well-being by allowing yourself to be on the receiving end of life. The greatest lie ever handed down from generation to generation is that it's better to give than receive. It's not. That is based on lack and scarcity and guilt and shame for feeling less worthy, less deserving, less self-esteem than other people's, less levels of significance. And you are equal in 8.3 billion people on the planet. You are equal with everybody else. You're not less than anybody else. When you level up your ability to receive, you stop being over responsible for everybody else. Then you can finally step into the abundance that is rightfully yours. And it's there to be received as soon as your nervous system will allow you to receive it. Guys, that's my breakthrough today. I hope that helps. There's a difference between over responsibility and generosity. Generosity is from abundance. Over responsibility is from guilt, shame, embarrassment, feelings of selfishness, feeling over responsible for everybody. It's assuming control and authority over people's lives that you don't naturally have. I hope this is making sense. I hope you can differentiate those two. August 28th and 29th, just outside of St. Louis, Missouri, in my current hometown of St. Charles, Missouri. Built to give, rebuilt to receive. I hope to see you there. It's going to be a great, great workshop. And we're going to tap on subjects just like this. If this is helpful, get in the room, and I can't wait to spend some time with you.